Talking about glory halls at Comic-Con.
Welcome to the Astro Maxx Show. I'm your host, Max. With me, co-host Will and fellow Trekker.
Indeed.
Today, we are going to begin the long voyage into the Star Trek universe. Which, going back to grade school?
Great.
Yeah, I mean, as far as, like, my whole life, I can remember watching Star Trek. I remember as a kid, Next Generation was still coming out. So it was like Tuesday nights or something. The family'd get together and watch whatever the newest episode of Next Generation was. And then I had one of those really old like dial TVs.
Why are we so old?
I don't know. When did we get so old? But the great thing is it doesn't matter how old we get, because if we weren't this old, we wouldn't be able to appreciate the sort of like quasi golden age or like new age of Star Trek that we're going into, right? So like be grateful that we live in a time where there's not just like one new Trek show, but there's like a ton of new Trek shows.
And it's quality stuff.
It is quality stuff. It is very quality stuff.
Quality.
However, today's episode is not going to be about the new stuff. We're gonna wind the clocks back to 2004, roughly.
We should know this.
Well, somewhere in there,
yeah.
Roughly 2004. That was since we're talking about the final season of not Discovery,
Enterprise.
We're talking about the final season of Enterprise, which did run through 2004. So I feel fairly accurate in my timekeeping.
I'm fine with it.
I'm
fine with that.
But there is so just for clarity's sake, I'm a huge Star Trek Enterprise fan. I did not watch Star Trek Enterprise when it first came out. It took me until probably 10 years ago that you convinced me to watch Enterprise.
Yeah, about 10 years ago. He was a late comer to the series. I was as well. I didn't watch it as it came out.
We had no faith of the heart.
We did not have faith of the heart. That was the problem.
That was the problem. We needed to stay the course.
We did. We needed to bear with that intro and get to the meat behind it. We did not at first.
No. And I don't think most people did either. That's why it only lasted 4 seasons. Sadly.
There's some, I'm sure there's other inside baseball with the studio and the producers that culminated in a forward out with Enterprise. But we like the popular fan held belief that it was really the intro that killed it. 'Cause it's bad.
It's and if it had just been like the imagery in the video is great.
It is.
Like if they would have done that with like a classic Star Trek music over it, I think you would have a really great intro. Very similar to what Discovery did.
Yeah.
But having whatever Dave Matthews Band wannabe band that was.
Well, but I understand each Trek wants to sort of reinvent a little bit, and they want to kind of push the boundaries. I don't know why you plant your flag there on the intro. I don't know why you stand your ground with that one. I don't get it.
I don't either. I really don't. But so I finally got around to watching some Enterprise. Got through the first 3 seasons, no problem. Those were all really great. Season 3 peaked, and I had to be okay with that. And so I stopped watching it. that was the end for me. I was like, I don't need to know anything after the Xindi saga. It doesn't matter. That was the most complete and perfect season of Star Trek I've ever watched. Let's just let it be.
And remains to this day.
Although Discovery gives it a hard run for its money in a few places.
It does.
But then we were talking the other night about different alien factions and sort of where we wanted to start this channel and what we wanted to talk about. And you were like, well, It's funny you should mention that you don't like the Romulans, because there's this 3-parter in season 4 of Enterprise that's got some great Romulan stuff in it, and also is like a great Commander Shran arc. So I was like, okay, well, we can talk about awesome Shran stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about one of the better Romulan arcs I've seen, and we can also rope in sort of this early Federation stuff. So it really is ground zero for Trek.
It kind of is. It's odd that it falls. I guess it's not odd. It seems odd at first glance that it would fall in season 4 of Enterprise. This sort of, I don't know, formative, thematically formative script that someone thought of. But I'm glad that it did, and it's got so much to bring to the table as far as Trek tropes, Trek history.
Yep.
And it gives. What I also love about it is sort of gives hints at like the formation of the Federation. Just sort of these alliances slowly but surely forming in the Alpha Quadrant, which for a nerd like I am, it's kind of like, okay, this is what I live for in Trek lore. Like, how did it all start?
You get to the end of, I think it's the second one, where they bring the Andorian fleet and the Enterprise and the Tellarites, and I think there's a couple Vulcan ships in there too, and they're all sort of cruising together, and there's this one shot of them flying, and you just get goosebumps, man. You get goosebumps.
I did.
It's good. So where do we want to... Let's start there, then. Let's start with the sort of building of the Federation, because that's something that's kind of unique to Enterprise, in that they're... And every Trek kind of approaches this differently, but in Enterprise, there's just no Federation. It's Starfleet, which is really like one makeshift ship, and I think eventually there's like 2 of them.
Right. So there's Enterprise, and then in season 4 they built Columbia, which is basically like next gen Enterprise, the next generation.
Yeah. But so Starfleet might be a bit of an exaggeration.
A little. They got 4 or 5 ships floating around.
Yeah. It's right up there with like Space Force.
Yeah, but like in season 3 with the Xindi threat, they're like, who's gonna deal with this? There's really the one choice.
Yeah, they're like, Archer, go ye forth and save the race.
Yeah, it's not like who's gonna. You got the one.
In this 3-parter, which starts with episode Babel, which is the planet they're going to for the diplomat.
Right?
Babel. I think it's pronounced commonly as like Babel.
I think it's Babel.
But in the episode they call it Babel.
Yeah, I think it's.
So it's not the Tower of Babel. It's different. It's Babel.
Right.
They gotta be Trek about it.
They do have to be Trek about it. So.
You can't have alien races with the same pronunciation of cities and planets.
Right, which is right. In my recollection, and guys, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's really our first introduction, at least up close, to the Tellarites.
Yeah.
Right. They're in another Enterprise episode that I can't place chronologically. Where Captain Archer gets kidnapped by a Tellarite bounty hunter.
And they're gonna like ransom him off.
Yeah. Is that that must be season 1 or 2, right?
I think it's in season 2.
Okay, so
I'm not sure. But
we have met them before.
Yeah. But this is their first exposure to like Tellarite culture,
which is fun.
And we have to insult them. What a great opening scene where it's.
I love that.
Hoshi and Archer in an argument.
You're like, what prompted this?
Like, did I miss something? Because I didn't watch the previous that was the first 3 episodes of season 4 that I've really watched.
Yeah.
Outside of the first one, half of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of like, oh man, did Will throw me into the deep end over here? I don't have any context. And then it's like, the Tellarites are just, if you don't insult them, they're going to be insulted.
Very, very strange, and I love that scene where they're sort of entertaining the ambassadors in the mess hall, and Trip is coming up to Archer, and he's like, I really like these people. It's very refreshing. You don't hold anything back, and Archer's like, You hold thing, we hold stuff back with the rest of us.
Yeah, like you're not telling me the truth.
Right, but you do get where Trip is coming from, because it must be liberating to be able to sort of just like let it fly.
Yeah,
right.
Not have to. I mean, as friendly as the crew of the Enterprise is, like it's still a military organization, right? Like there's still a captain and there's officers and like there's decorum that you have to follow. Like you can't just go up to Archer and be like, "Yo, dude, you need a bath." Like, you smell bad.
Oh, you could. It's just probably just sort of stepping outside form a little bit.
Yeah, you might find yourself, cleaning the bulkheads a few extra times that week, or like, hey, Trip, I got an assignment for you. The deflector array needs to be scrubbed out. Here's a toothbrush. Good to clean it. So it's the beginning of the Tellarites. You get them involved. Of course, at this point, Commander Shran and the Andorians are well established as part of the Enterprise show. Mm-hmm. Commander Shran, of course, played by Jeffrey Combs, who will get his own episode at some point.
Several, I should think.
I mean, Shran in and of himself will probably get his own episode, so I don't know that we need to belabor the Andorians too much. But for the most part, what I find interesting is that the Tellarites and the Andorians both have really prominent facets of their culture that are also very human, right? So the Andorians are they're big on their military, mm-hmm. right? And this sort of the prowess and the honor and the esteem that comes with being a member of the Imperial Guard, right? And this reverence that comes with it, which we can relate to in our own world and time. And then you have the Tellarites who are they're like every Karen in every retail store ever. Right. They're free thinkers, and as humans we're not free thinkers, but they express themselves fully.
They do,
and that's also something as humans we can appreciate.
But they also have this baseline. Their baseline is pretty adversarial, and so while it would probably be refreshing at first to be you kind of have to maintain that. Right? To be in the room with Tellarites
indefinitely
would be exhausting.
Oh, yeah. That would be a lot.
That would be a lot. And, I'm not super sure what canon has sort of decreed, before Enterprise sort of took up this groundwork here. But I found it interesting and kind of apropos that, earlier, it's sort of discussed and explored that the Andorians and the Vulcans are sort of embroiled in this border skirmishes and conflict over territories, and they're like, well, what's the relationship going to be like between the Tellarites and these other Alpha Quadrant species? And it's going to be more of the same. So it can establish this tone of just a regional instability and distrust, right?
Which is nice because it fits in with the later Treks where, certainly in Next Generation, which takes the approach that the Federation is super powerful, they're at their peak, right? And all of this instability is sort of dealt with and quashed. Mm-hmm. So all the instability is coming from these holdout empires, the Cardae and the Romulans, and then Q.
Klingons.
Yeah, but the Klingon War is also kind of over. So
I mean, it is.
They're more
it is over. Sort of on paper, you've got the Khitomer Accords.
Yeah,
but there's this looming threat, right? They never want to be seen as sort of, cards off the table. We're in peace now.
Yeah,
that doesn't jive with the Klingons. They're no, we're still whatever's on paper, we're still ready to roll.
Yeah, there's always the captain of a random bird of prey and be like, fire torpedoes. They're gonna take the Worf approach to all things.
Oh yeah.
And they're just a super warlike race. So peace is tentative always. But in Enterprise, the area right around our solar system is rife with conflict that you don't see in later Treks. Obviously, because the Federation's there. So this you see Archer again in these three parts try and wing it as he goes. We're like, yeah, we're gonna have a diplomatic summit with the Andorians and the Tellarites, and we're gonna make peace. And then he gets them all in the same room together, and the very next scene, he's having dinner with T'Pol, and he's like, we might not be ready for this.
This may have taken on a little much.
Yeah, I might not have appreciated how difficult it was going to be to end 50 years of war between the Andorians and the Tellarites.
And the Tellarite ambassador, Grawl, I believe is his name, calls him on it too. He's like, why should we trust humanity to be this sort of neutral party? You already have a relationship with the Andorians.
Yep.
But
they saved your species.
Right. So, but even apart from that, like, even if that weren't the case, like, who are you guys? Like, you just got here.
Right. You're like the freshmen.
Yeah.
And be like, I'm going to sit at the head of the cool kid table.
It's
and
very...
And seniors are like, no.
Exactly.
Like,
you know?
Go to
so
band.
it is this weird, kind of awkward space for Archer to hold, but that's why... That's why we love Archer, right? Is because like they picked him because you are going to be charting these territories for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a big burden.
Yeah.
For any captain, but like, you know, we got to find the guy, and he was the guy.
So let's take a minute and just kind of look at Archer real quick, because it's important in every trek. You got to understand who your captain is, because it dictates the rest of the bridge crew and how they interact with everything. And in Archer, I feel like they really took the best attributes of all of the other captains that had come before him, and put them into one character, and all of those aspects are on display in this 3-part episode, because you have the cerebral diplomat Picard, right? Like Archer's calculating, he understands the stakes, he understands the need for diplomacy and forging alliances. You also have the Kirk aspect where, you know, he's going to throw down, he's going to get into a duel.
Yeah, he's prepared for every eventuality. He's like, all right, if it turns to violence, I'm ready.
I'm gonna double hand punch it. Like, that's the end all be all of martial arts moves.
It's true. I'm going to fucking hand fist this right now. To be fair, Enterprise they were the first to step away from that choreography and a lot of their fight scenes.
Yeah, they were the first to have choreography.
We're the first to have real choreography. I don't know that other treks had really discovered that was a thing.
Yeah, no, a choreographer wasn't in the final budgets.
No, it was not in the budget.
They were too busy finding the most ridiculous costuming they could come up with.
Right.
So you have that element of Kirk, and then you have like a bit of the Sisko element, which is kind of the wild card in this one, because, and maybe it's also the Janeway element, because Sisko and Janeway are very similar in that they understand there's a prime directive, like they understand there's rules to things, and they just choose not to follow them for different reasons.
Right.
Janeway because she's on the other side she's in an entirely different quadrant, and Sisko because she's like living on the far frontiers of space. So both are just so far removed from the Federation that they're like...
They kind of got to make do sometimes.
Yeah, like what are you going to do, fire me? Okay. Who else are you going to get to find to run this crummy Cardassian station? Or, you know, I'm the only captain on this starship.
Yeah.
You want a Maquis to be your captain?
Okay, fire me. Let's have Chakotay up on this tip.
That was Janeway's best move, was to make the Maquis the first officer, so Starfleet could never replace her.
Even when communication was reconnected with the Alpha Quadrant.
Like, Janeway, you have broken every temporal code we have. She's like, Chakotay is next in line.
It's great. That's hilarious.
So that's like kind of unfair that Archer gets to be the best of all of these things, but he carries it so well. He's so well acted, and he's such a well written character that you can see him struggling with like all of these different elements as he tries to plot what the best course for humanity is. Because of course he also knows that there's some great destiny for humanity, which is also a burden. What a burden to have, right?
Know, right? Like, thanks, crewman Daniels.
Yeah, I can't tell you what it is, but you will change. You will forever change the galaxy. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
What do I do? Well, I can't tell you that. It's important.
Yeah. So for anyone who's tuning in, who's not familiar with Enterprise at all, you'll get to know Crewman Daniels and all about the temporal Cold War. Spoilers. And Captain Archer struggling with his place in history, somewhat being already revealed to him.
Yeah.
And what that means, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah, but even if you haven't watched Enterprise, I'm assuming you've watched some Star Trek. Otherwise, I don't know what taglines we put on this episode. I don't know what hashtag we use that you came here, but if you have watched no Star Trek, Enterprise is a good place to start.
Yeah.
If you've watched any Star Trek, you should be aware that there's a Federation, and that at some point in the past it didn't exist. Enterprise takes place in that past. But let's talk about classic tropes of Star Trek, because there's like good TV, there's bad TV, and then there's like Star Trek, which sometimes is excellent TV, and sometimes should be really bad TV, but still falls into the highly enjoyable side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of those tropes that you see in this episode is the duel that Archer fights with Commander Shran.
Yes, the captain's contest. That's
Yes.
kind of what I want to call that trope.
Yes, that's a great term for it.
Yeah.
The captain's contest.
Captain's contest. And it really, it kind of, like we've been discussing, like why it was like such a special scene for us. And I think it bridges this divide that has appeared between other iterations of Trek and the OG series. And this death duel, this like death match that happens between Archer and Shran captures like some real OG flavor. It does, and it's kind of like, I don't know, it was really special for us.
Yeah, between the ridiculous costuming of it, we have this metal gauntlet that's just like a big glove thing with a chain on it, and then that stupid little worst sword ever.
What is they called it an ice miner's tool?
Yeah,
right. And it's just
like
this
who's mining
weird
ice with this?
Yeah, it's like this weird like melon slice of a blade that they just hold on to and just sort of punch each other with. Very strange.
They're like, don't block with it. You can't block with it. Don't slash with it. You go for the eyes. That's all. You just go for the eyes.
just get some slashes on him. He'll bleed to death. It's fine.
I want Worf's opinion of that weapon. Like I want Michael Dorn to do his own podcast where he just breaks down all of the different terrible melee weapons that Star Trek has put forth and just gives the Klingon perspective on them. I will watch that forever.
I would live for that podcast.
Yeah. Off topic there for a second. I want to go back to the duel and original Trek, because there's now 7 Trek series. You got the original series, Next Generation, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Brave New World, and Lower Decks. Yeah, so 7. And each one has been different and jumped.
There's a new animated series actually that we haven't got to.
Oh, and we also forgot the original series animated series, but I think all Trek fans are trying to forget that one. Collectively, we can be like orcs. If we believe it enough, it'll go away. But the time jump between the original series and Next Generation is huge. Like they did the original series, and then there was like a ton of movies. So the style of TV changed so dramatically from when you see the end of the original series to the start of Next Generation that I think later Treks had to really kind of cherry pick out of the original series, like what was going to follow through, and I think the Captain's Contest is one of those easy ones that they pick out because every series kind of does it, and I think they're all sort of looking at that famous episode where Kirk duels the Gorn.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's his contest, and so all series are going to have a moment like that.
Right.
How does this one stack up to that, do you think?
Well, this one, so the duel in itself is the stakes are a little different because they're friends,
Yeah.
which adds a different flavor to it. Archer genuinely likes Shran. Shran genuinely likes Archer. There's like mutual respect. But I think that adds a lot for me anyway, watching it. It's like, oh gosh, these friends are having to fight to the death over this. What sparks the duel is interesting too, right? Like it's It's this blood feud because
it's this 12,000 word document of a blood feud that the Andor.
The Yushan. That's what it's called. The Yushan. Yes. I would just say in general, it stacks up very well. It's super entertaining. It's got that OG flavor to it. And
how does it stack up with the duel between Riker and his dad?
I don't like to stack things against that.
It sets the bar pretty low.
Very low. Yeah. The duel between that entire episode is rough, right?
Yeah.
I watched it several times. I'll probably watch it several more just because it's Trek. And I love Riker and all of his forms. I really do.
Yeah. You got to Riker your chair at one point. Next week.
All right, I got to work out in preparation for that. That's a hell of a move.
It's the only choreography Next Gen needed.
Exactly. The Riker maneuver. Mounting the chair from the front.
I think my favorite part of that captain's contest between Archer and Trent is how it ends. Honestly, it's a clever little loophole that Archer finds in it. You know, you don't have to necessarily kill your opponent; you just have to humiliate them. So,
right.
So he just cuts off his antenna.
Right, which is so we already said the duel in itself, right? The duel in itself and the way it's sort of carried forward has that original series feel. The way that they sort of navigate the rules of the Yushan, that's very Next Gen to me, right? That's very much all right, give me the data pad with all of the rules, and we're gonna just sort of science this thing a little bit, and it works,
It does
well.
It does. So there's one other big thing we got to talk about, but what's going on with the rest of the characters in that episode? The rest of the crew, as far as the rest of the crew goes, it's not a great episode aside from when Trip and Malcolm are on the Romulan ship.
Oh,
doing space stuff.
Right.
That's pretty good. But is there anything going on in the rest of the crew that you want to talk about? Or are you ready to jump into the Romulans?
I'm kind of ready. Well, if I think of something, that'll come up later. But
okay.
I'm kind of ready to jump up into the Romulans.
Yeah, let's talk Romulans.
Let's talk Romulans. And
And
their constant, underhanded attempts to destabilize the other powers of the Alpha Quadrant.
Yeah.
Right? Just completely on brand for them. From a distance, trying to sort of puppet master things in a way that leaves no trace of their involvement.
Classic villain trope, they actually make it worse.
They do. They do. Yeah.
In their attempt to destabilize the region, they actually stabilize it.
Yeah. So what they should have done, the entire arc opens basically with Shran's ship, not Kirshar, damn it, what's it called? Anyways, we'll come back to it.
All I can think of right now is Kittimer. And that's so far off. I mean, it's shameful off base. But
I want to call it the Kirshara, which is not. That's the weird Idic thing with all the teachings of Surak that is several episodes either before in the Vulcan arc of season 4 of Enterprise. It's not the Kirshara, the Kumari.
There we go. I knew you were going to get there eventually.
I got it.
Will's got this.
I got it. It's the Kumari. Has been destroyed by what seems to be a Tellarite warship. Several things about it don't quite add up in Shran's estimation, but he's still convinced that it's the Tellarites. And
he's programmed to convince it's a Tellarite. I mean, they've been at war for so long, of course.
Right.
You see a Tellarite ship blowing you up.
I don't care. Yeah, I don't care what else you see. You're like, damn it, Tellarites, I knew it.
Yeah.
But what was I going to say?
So, but what it ends up being is it's not a Tellarite ship. It's this prototype Romulan drone ship.
That's right.
Which you find out later is actually is a drone, but it's got early late Romulans have a cloaking device. They obviously don't have cloaks yet. What they have is these hollow emitters, so they can make their ship look like any other ship.
Right, and then sort of similar thing with their weapons. They can make it look.
Yeah,
to sensors like it was a Tellarite weapon that destroyed this.
They
this
have the rotating phase frequencies,
Right.
which is like I think the first time that technology is mentioned, and
Yes.
they have it later. It's like very common technology.
It is a very common, but I think also sensors have evolved to the point where they can mostly piece that out.
Yeah. Well, I think later they just use it for penetrating different armor,
shield
frequencies. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Except for Borg, it doesn't work at Wolf 359.
No, it doesn't.
They try it, doesn't work.
So sad.
Rotate the phase frequency. I did all of them.
Yeah, there are no more to try. We're just dead.
Yeah. And then First Contact, it's such a common technology. It's like in the phase rifles have like the same thing that can rotate frequencies.
Yes. Yeah, or they hear the word Borg and they're like flip a program on. Like the computer's like, oh, okay, it's time to rotate.
They Tommy guns. Yeah. That's how you take out the Borg.
Yes. This is ancient, at this point in time, like ancient, basically.
Good old fashioned ballistics.
Yes.
And the Borg don't stand a chance. You get some cannons,
just
strap them to the side.
It's a holographic Tommy gun, alright? It's not even a real Tommy gun.
Look,
it's the hologram with the safety protocols turned off.
You're thinking about it? Don't think about it.
I'm not thinking about it.
Don't think about it.
I'm not thinking about it. I love it. It's a great scene.
It's still just rotating energy harmonics.
It is. It's just hard light.
Oh. So there's a point in this where, for some weird reason, like Malcolm and Trip are gonna like teleport onto the Romulan drone
with a couple Makos.
Right. Oh, then they don't actually die. They actually get out. Yeah. I love that the Makos actually survive most things. Yes. They're not just red shirts.
They are resilient ass
red shirts. They are badass. Yeah, the Makos are badass.
I mean, obviously, kind of Keyes dies in season 3, and but they built him up to such a recurring, a valued recurring character that it's a real moment. I love it.
You couldn't go through season 3 without tragedy.
No.
It just wouldn't have had the same impact. So,
Yes. But back to it. Malcolm and Trip.
I don't remember why they thought it was a good idea to beam over there.
Because, they come across the ship. The ship has with all of its sort of incursions and mischief that it's been wreaking, and being a drone ship, they're having some mechanical issues. So it's designed to self-repair, but it's kind of got to be stopped to self-repair.
Right.
And they don't know Enterprise has followed them, and so Enterprise is like, we can't get any readings. We got to beam people over. So they're like, obviously, bring some Makos, bring some muscle.
Okay. So they just needed to go over to get some readings on it.
Yeah, they want information, right? They were like,
okay. I looked away for a minute, and the next minute they were like back. They were like on the drone, and I was like, what are you guys doing over there?
So they go over there for reconnaissance, basically, and Makos, the ship starts up again because they sense Enterprise close, and they're like, oh, fuck.
We gotta move. We gotta move.
Oh, well, actually, so they fight. Enterprise is like, we're actually outgunned here. We have to run.
As always.
Yeah, we have to run. Our transporter is down. Sorry, guys. We'll come back for you.
Stay frosty.
So Malcolm and Trip, and I love their dynamic. They've got a couple other episodes. They're kind of they're kind of the buddy team of Enterprise.
Yeah, they want to be Julian and O'Brien, but they're a little bit more reined in than that.
They're a little bit more reined in.
They don't have a hollow suite program to go.
It's less of a bromance. I would have, just the way I love Star Trek, I would have preferred perhaps they just embrace the bromance and really go for it.
Yeah.
I buy into that every time.
Well,
but it's still enjoyable.
We'll have to have a side conversation later about great romances in Trek, because I don't know that there's that many of them.
There's not too many. No.
Picard and Wesley.
Oh,
Shut up, Wesley.
Wesley, shut up. Yes, but anyways, I love their dynamic. They're always great to see on screen together, and there's a lot of it in this 3-parter. They're on the ship, they're exploring, they're like, what the hell is going on? There's no crew that we can find. Where the fuck is the bridge? We're running out of oxygen. Yeah. There's no inertial dampener, so everything this time turns on a dime. We're like thrown against the bulkheads.
They keep looking for the bridge and they can't find it, and they're like taking off their helmets and like just opening up random conduits and like pumping oxygen into their tanks, and
very strange.
The science in that episode where they're on the other ship. Like, first off, speaking of OG series throwbacks, right? the interior of that drone ship is made at Hobby Lobby. Like, it's 100% like, it's like Christmas lights and then like dryer vent shafts just like strewn about with more Christmas lights in them.
And it's great.
I had not seen that level of like low tech set dressing in a long time. Because like I love Discovery, but Discovery's so clean. Like everything about Discovery is clean and flashy and bright.
Yes.
And so like to be watching that and then to kind of like jump over and watch Enterprise, which in most of Enterprise is still pretty clean. Like there's not a lot of like, let's get into the Jeffries tubes and all that stuff. And then inside the Romulan drone, like inside this prototype ship, a prototype of a prototype at best, is, you know,
just cables lying around.
It's like rewinding to like
it is
pilot episode of the original series. Yeah. In the level of just classy set dressings.
Which, God, it was just great too. It worked. Every part of it worked.
My other favorite part is when Malcolm and Trip are like wandering around and the Romulans finally sense that there's like humans in it. And they're like, what do we do? And they're like, do a barrel roll. It's true. They just start flipping the ship to try and just like bludgeon them to death against the walls.
And then Malcolm's like, well, guess what, bitch? I got magnets on my boots. I got magnets.
Like, how dumb are these Romulans? Right. I think we went. I think for you went into this trying to convince me that the Romulans are cool, and I think they are. And I took away from this episode that they're as every bit incompetent as I think they are.
Look, that's the thing, right? Is they take it way too far. Because if they had done their goal was to destabilize the region, but more immediately and distinctly, what they wanted to do was just fuck up this peace conference, right?
Yeah.
You know, turn this first sort of.
Well, do they even know the peace conference is going on?
I'm sure they do,
because they're like, oh, it's the humans interfering with this,
right?
Like we got to go kill the humans.
No, I'm pretty sure they know. Like they're it's the Romulans. One thing they have is decent intelligence. I'm sure.
Not based on that episode.
Okay. I'm almost positive that they know what they're getting into and what they're trying to disrupt. Because if they didn't know, it's just like a hell of a coincidence in timing that they chose this moment, right? They know. So, but if they had, after they had destroyed Shran's ship as the Tellarites, if at that point they had just gone home, they would have accomplished their goal.
See, I think there's a flaw in your logic.
Okay.
Because I don't think they know. Because keep in mind, this is way in the before times. I don't think the Romulans have the Tal Shiar yet. I think this is the incident where they were like, yeah, we need a spy network.
I disagree. And let me tell you why. Because we do get some interaction between that military officer who's the admiral who's running this drone mission. Yeah. And one of the senators. And the flavor of this Romulan, oppressive, militarized society is still very much there. And I don't think such a conservative, sort of fascist establishment could survive and could maintain itself without some sort of secret police, which is the Tal Shiar. So I think
okay, all right,
that's my reasoning.
All right.
The Tal Shiar exists at this point. They don't explicitly say so.
Despite the evidence in the episode, I will give the Romulans the benefit of the doubt.
Right. Well, this is the thing, right? Like, just because they have the Tal Shiar doesn't mean the Tal Shiar is any more competent than it is in later iterations of Star Trek.
It's so disappointing. Like, the Romulans in general... This three-parter does a pretty good job with the Romulans. Their technology is, like, creepy and dark and brutal. Like, they're just abducting people
very green,
strapping them into machines.
Yes. Very greens too. Lots of greens.
Lots of greens. Yeah, so many greens. Yeah. So many different shades of green. Really an offensive number of shades.
You're just beating me over the head with green.
It's like, I get it.
Yeah.
You like the color green.
You love green.
But I love there's a little like reveal where you find like you think they're on the ship and then they're not on the ship and you're like, oh, that's very Romulan. Like to be fighting a remote war, like super Romulan.
It's the end of the first episode of that 3-part arc. That's the end of Babel.
Yeah, and they like pull out and they're like in this. They're just in a tower because the whole time you're like, why are these Romulans just not going down into the Jeffries tubes and shooting these idiots?
Where's the intruder alert?
Right.
Yeah.
And I was just getting so mad at them. I was like, you incompetent boobs! And then you find out they're not even on the ship, and you're like, oh.
Okay.
All right.
Right.
Well played, Romulans.
Yes.
So they were cool. But, again, in the end, they're like Cobra Commander, right? Like, Romulans are just like every terrible cartoon villain who can't get out of their own way.
Yeah.
Because they're too busy showing off how awesome they are.
Yeah.
They're like, look at our cool drone. Let's see if we can get 2 of them going at once. Like, that's a bad idea. Like, I don't care.
I don't care. Unlimited expansion, bitch.
Like,
let's do this.
Our pilot's about to die. He can't fly one more ship. Okay. Well, what about one more time with 2 more ships?
It's such bad decision making.
Do new math.
Yeah, it's bad. But so like I was saying, if they had, I mean, if the episode wouldn't really have gone far at that point, but if they had just destroyed Shran's ship and just left back to Romulus, they would have accomplished everything they set out to.
Yeah. But they couldn't. Their own hubris prevented them from doing that.
And that's a huge sort of villain trope, and especially a Romulan trope, is the hubris.
It is the Romulan trope.
It's the Romulan.
It's the Romulan trope. Yeah. Like the Cardassians have a lot of hubris.
They sure do.
But the Cardassians live to fight another day. They're like, we lost this one.
Yeah.
But we will be back.
Mm-hmm.
And
cool. We're gonna go lick our wounds.
We're coming.
Yeah, we're gonna lick our wounds for a couple of years and just sort of nurse our bitter hatred to the rest of you.
Yeah.
We're gonna come out swinging
with the Dominion as allies. You brought this on yourself, Alpha Quadrant.
You got. God damn it. There's an interesting moment as well. It's just kind of fleeting actually, but it's like a glance at this interesting Archer moment that I like, and it's when it's one of the times in this 3-parters where Archer gets Shran and the Tellarite ambassador to sit down and try to talk this thing out, and they're arguing and they're threatening each other, and Archer's like, "All right, why don't we just try all acting like humans?"
Yeah.
And Tellarite's like, "You asked us not to be insulted,"
yeah.
You know. And it's this weird moment that I think just glances by, but I don't know. I think there's more to it, and I'm still unclear on how I feel about it. I think in a similar situation, I would be tempted to like say something like that. I'm just like I'm busy trying to walk this balance.
He follows it up with like humans in our history, like when we have a common enemy, like we put aside our own quarrels and we like deal with the common enemy first, and then we go back to quarreling with each other.
Exactly.
There's one thing humans do really well. It's single out somebody else.
Yeah.
And gang up on them.
Gang up on them, and then,
And then when it's over, we go back to hating each other.
And killing each other.
That's the human way.
He didn't follow that analogy up with the rest of the history.
Yeah, no. He intentionally left out most of human history when he was like, let's deal with the common enemy. Unite around the common enemy.
Yeah, and then, back to senselessly murdering each other.
But it is an interesting concept for the early Federation that like it isn't an alliance born out of like higher ideals. It's an alliance born out of fear, which is I don't know how that sits with me in terms of like the overall canon of Star Trek.
So I think it sits well with me, and I'll say that because Archer, as he's venturing out on a lot of his sort of logs and conversations with Trip and T'Pol especially, it dwells on the fact that he's like, we thought we were going to come out here as explorers, but it turns out we're meeting so many bad guys. We're meeting sort of opponents, new adversaries wherever we look. And and I think the other species are obviously like in the midst of trying to find their own space and corner of the Alpha Quadrant, there's just going to be conflict, right? And this idea that sort of is planted in these episodes between the races, that cooperation can benefit us, in the midst and in the face of all of these dangers that we're facing. I mean, not only are we able to sort of deal with these threats as they arise better as a group, but just, in the midst of doing that, you're taking away a lot of the animus that existed before in other places.
Yeah, I think you're right. You've convinced me. I was not counting for all the times throughout Enterprise where they're like, are we ever going to get back to exploring? Are we ever going to get back to exploring? And they're like, yeah, well, but first we got to not be getting shot at by Tellurites, Andorians, Romulans, Vulcans, Klingons, whatever those lizard people were called from the future. Whatever. Like, this indie.
Right, this indie. At the cabal of those shapeshifters.
Yeah. I don't remember what they're called.
Silic, whatever the species is.
Yeah.
I forget.
Yeah. All right, well, I think that's going to wrap it.
I think we can wrap it there.
I think that's a wrap. I think we've covered those. I think we did those 3 episodes well.
Yes.
I think we did. I think Archer would be proud of us. More importantly, Shran.
Yeah.
Well, that's today's episode. If you enjoyed that episode, please give us a like, give us a share. Come back next week for more Trek. We're not going to be doing these in order.
No. Deep Space Nine?
Who knows? Whatever it's going to be a conversation about Trek.
Yeah.
So be sure to tune into it. And as always, thank you for watching the Astro Maxx Show.
Come back soon.